Professor Wergeles here. We've set up Ubuntu 18 server. We have updated the server. We're setting the time zone. We set the host name. We are now going to add a limited user. You could imagine if you have a company, you have 10, 20, hundreds, thousands of employees, you don't want them all logging into the same user. You don't want them to all be the Ubuntu user. You want to know which users logged in, what files are they accessing. You want to grant them permissions to certain files, and you need to manage all those user accounts. In fact, at Mizzou, they do that. Everybody has their own POPRINT. When you log on to the network, you log in with your POPRINT and password. And when you log into Canvas or other, they manage a list of users, and the users have different access, different levels, different permissions, and that's what we're going to do here on our server. So I'm in the root user. Once you log in with SSH, you can do a sudo -i. You can also do a sudo switch user dash to go into the root user. But once you're in the root user, you can then add a new limited user. Okay, I probably could have done it from the Ubuntu user as well, but go ahead and log in as the administrator to make sure there's no problems as we're running through the commands. So I'm going to add a user. They actually have an add user command, and I'm going to add it with my POPRINT. Okay, so if I had 10 different people in my business, I would either create usernames for them, or I would use their email address or their last name. For this course, we're going to use our POPRINT. So type your POPRINT there. Okay, mine is Wergeles N, and I'm going to hit enter. Okay, now you need to type a password here. Okay, you'll have to type a password here, and you'll want to remember this password. If you forget this password, it'll be really hard for you to get back into this account. I'm going to say impossible. I probably shouldn't say impossible, but it'll be impossible for you to get back in. And if it's not impossible, it'll be a really pain in the butt. So whatever password you type here, make sure you remember it. Either use a password that you normally use all the time, or put a password there and write it down in your notes. Definitely do not forget this password. So I'm going to use a password that I commonly use, and it wants you to retype it. So I'm going to type it again. And there we go. Now, if I have a company with a bunch of different people, I want to put their information so I remember which user's which. If I just put their last name or their email address, maybe they have a funny email address, I don't know who that is. So definitely type the name of the person. Okay, room number, maybe if they had an office number, you could type that. I'm going to leave it blank, so I just clicked enter. If you have the phone number, you can type the phone number. For now, I'm just going to leave enter. At least type the name. Other, you could put their email address if they had the email address, and then click enter. Okay, so you have their information. We're going to click yes for correct. At least type your name. Okay, that way you know which user is which. Now we've added a user. That user is not going to be in any corresponding group. Okay, we've just added a user. It actually creates their own group. Okay, but it's not going to be in any corresponding groups. I think you can do a cat etc groups, and you can see all the groups. So I did cat etc group. You can see I have an admin group. I have a root group. I also have a sudo group. Sudo is also administrator. You see Ubuntu is added to the sudo group. And if I scroll down, you'll see I also have my new group, which is my user, has its own group. Okay, but this new user is not going to have any type of permissions. It's not going to have sudo permissions. So we'll want to add them to the sudo list. Okay, so what you do is you add user, and then you specify which user you want. So I'm going to put my new user in the sudo list. That way I can run some administrative commands with that new user. I click enter. You'll see it adds Wergeles into the group, and that it's done. It's completed. So if I do a cat group again, go up to the sudo list, you'll see Ubuntu and Wergeles N is added to the list. Another common group is this www data. Okay, you'll have a public HTML directory on your server. That's where you're going to host all your websites. And a lot of times you'll keep a small group who can actually modify the live version of the site. So you may have 1 or 2 users, maybe a small group, handful of users. So you'd add them to this group, and then you would change the public HTML directory for this group to be able to modify the data, which we'll do here in a little bit. Once the new users added to the sudo group, we can go ahead and switch user to that user. So since I'm root, I don't have to type sudo, but it's a habit for me. I'm always typing sudo, so I'm going to type it even though that's not necessary. I'm going to do switch user, that's SU, switch user to Wergel's N, which is your pod print. So put your pod print there, and you'll see now I'm on the new user that I created. Okay, you'll see I'm in the new user that I created. It's Wergel's N at professorwergeles.com. Now, you'll see to run a command as administrator, which is the root user, it says use the sudo command. And you can look at the manual for the sudo root for details. So it recognizes that I'm an administrator, which is good. Now, what I want to do is I don't want to use the Ubuntu account anymore. Amazon set that up for me. I want to use my own account. And for the rest of this semester, we're going to be using our own account. We're not going to be using the Ubuntu account anymore. But I can't SSH directly to this user yet. I need to fix up the SSH permissions in order for it to work, in order for that PIM file to work. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a directory. Okay, if I do an ls-l, you'll see I have nothing there. So I'm going to make a directory, mkdir, make a directory called .ssh. You'll see the dot in the front. That means it's a hidden directory. It's a hidden file or directory. That's what the period means. So when I just do an ls, you won't see it. So if I click enter, do an ls, you don't see it. But if I do an ls-la for show list long, so show all the details and the hidden files, you'll see now I see a lot of more files there. Earlier, I didn't see anything. But now when I do A, show the hidden files, or show all the files, you'll see the .ssh file is there. Now, in the SSH file, I need to change the permissions. I need to change them to 700. You'll see here it was read-write executable to the owner, read-write executable to the group, read and executable to the world. You'll see the D there. That means it's a directory. So when I change mod to 700, do an ls-la, you'll see now it's only read, write, and executable to the owner. This first one here is the owner. This second one here is the group. And then the world is everybody, so it's public. So now the owner, which is me, is the only one who can access this file. Okay, which is good because we're doing SSH. We don't want anybody else to access this credential. Now it's important that these file permissions are exactly the same. If you do not have these exact same file permissions, you will not be able to log in. Now it's not the end of the world. You can still log in through Ubuntu and switch over and fix it, but make sure that you're doing the exact same commands here. Now I'm going to create a file, use touch. It's going to be in the SSH directory, and it's going to be called authorized_keys with an S. In one of the lectures, I forgot the S, and it wasn't working. This needs to be case sensitive the same. Make sure it's authorized keys with an S. Touch, it just creates an empty file, so it's a new empty file. And I need to change the permissions on that file as well. So I'm going to do 600 on the SSH directory, authorized keys. Now, I'm not typing this out. I do .s and hit tab. And I type A and hit tab. Don't type it out. Use the command line shortcuts. Okay, just like I did :X, that's a little bit shorter than WQ. Use tab. Use all the shortcuts. Use the up arrow instead of typing the command again. Try to know the shortcuts of the command line. Get familiar with it, because as a developer, you're going to be using the command line frequently. So I'm changing mine to 600 through authorized keys. If I do an ls-la on SSH, authorized keys, you'll see that made it only read and write to the owner. Okay, 600 is read and write to the owner. Make sure these permissions are the same as well. If they're slightly different, it will not work. Okay, now what we need to do is we need to access the PIM file on our local machine. What I could do is I could exit the server, or I could just go ahead and open up another terminal. A lot of times as a developer, I may have 4 or 5 terminals open. That way I can switch back and forth. I can do multiple things at the same time. I may have 2 terminals connected to the same server. That way I can run multiple commands or files or programs at the same time. Okay, so a lot of times I have multiple terminals open. Now this is my local machine. I need to CD to where my KeyPair file is. So I'm clicking the up arrow to go back to where my directory was. Okay, that way I don't have to type it again. Sometimes it is quicker to just go ahead and type it. I'm hitting A, hitting tab there. I'm not typing it all out. And I need to access this PIM file. Okay, I need this PIM file so I can get the public key. If I open this up, so I'm just going to use VI on KeyPair. Notice I'm hitting tab. I type F, hit tab. If I open this up, you'll see it's my RSA private key. So what is this? Essentially, this is like my password. When I SSH to the server, it looks at what user it is. It's going to go to the server and check the public key. If the private key sent to the server matches the public key, so once you use the RSA key, if they match, then it'll let me log in, kind of like a password, but it's more secure than a password. It's easy to write a quick script to hack and see what your password is. It would be hard to write a script and guess all of these characters here compared to a short little 10-character password that you may create. So usually the RSA public private key or a KeyPair is more secure of a login. Okay, so I'm here where it is. Don't change this file. So do a :Q exclamation to do a force quit so you don't save any of those changes. And we need to get the public key. Okay, so I'm on my local machine and I'm going to type SSH-keygen-y. Okay, and then I'm going to hit enter. And it's going to say, where is this file? Okay, now I know where this file is, but I don't want to type that again. So actually do a Control-C to force quit. If I do a ls, you'll see the file is there. What you could do is a pwd, path to the current working directory. Hit enter, and it shows you the path here. Have that available so when I run keygen again and then ask me for where the file is, I could just copy the path here. Okay, make your life easier. Don't type it, because if you type it, you're going to mess the spaces up or whatever it may be. So I did a paste, and I do a /, and it needs to be the PIM file's name. So I copied it and hit paste again and hit enter. Okay, if you have the path correct and it's going to a PIM file, which is your private key, it will generate the public key. Okay, so it's generating the public key here. Now what I'm going to do is copy this public key. Make sure you get all of it. A lot of times with Git Bash, for some reason you select all of it and it'll leave the last 2 characters off. Same with PowerShell or Mac Terminal. Okay, make sure you copy it, and when you paste it, come back and double check to make sure you have it all. So I'm going to go back over here to the server, and I'm going to actually open up this authorized keys. Now I'm the owner of it, but I still type sudo. Okay, it's just a habit of mine. A lot of times you open up a file and it says you're not the owner of the file. You cannot write the file. So it's just a habit for me to do sudo. Now it's going to ask for my password. Type the password you typed earlier. Click on I for insert. Click on Control V or Command V. Paste the public key. You'll see it ends with BOP. If I come back here, B0P, that's correct. It starts with AAA. Come over here, starts with AAA, looks correct to me. Go ahead and click escape. Shift colon. You can do a WQ for writing quick, or I'm lazy, I like to do X. It's the same thing. Click enter, and now it's saved. Okay, that public key needs to be exactly the same. So it wouldn't hurt to go ahead and look a little bit and make sure that that's the same. That way when you SSH, it actually works. Okay, we're going to give it a try. So you can exit out of your user. It goes back to root. You can exit out of root. It goes back to Ubuntu. You can exit out of Ubuntu. It goes back to your local machine. If you click on up, that's your SSH command. We are no longer going to be SSHing to Ubuntu. We're now going to be SSHing to our user. So I'm going to do Wergelese N. I'm switching Ubuntu to now Wergelese N. So I'm logging into this user at this server using this private key, which is our password, so to speak. Click enter. Does the SSH work? Woo! Yes, it does. We've now successfully logged in to our new user, Wergelese N at ProfessorWergelese.com. So it works. Okay, it works. We've added the user. We've created a user. We added the user to the sudo group. We made it where we can SSH with the user. Okay, and now we've successfully SSH'd and logged into the user. Okay, so it works. Now you see how easy it is to log into that user. Wouldn't it be horrible if somebody came over here and logged in as the root user? Once you have root access to the server, then you could do anything on the server. Okay, then you can do anything on the server. And a lot of students get hacked. For some reason, they'll get hacked by people in Russia or other countries. Iran. I got a student who got hacked last semester out of nowhere. And all of a sudden, they were receiving a message. If you want access back to your server, you need to send over this amount of money, $20 to this PayPal account. Okay, so don't be one of those users. Stick with Professor Wergelese and see how to disable root logins. We'll see you in the next video.